Well, thanks, Kurt, and good morning to everyone. And we've had a lot of already some conversation about our weather as of late, but the bottom line here is we're looking at a big change. And when does that change begin? Well, it's beginning right now as we speak, and I think most people will probably find it a little bit welcoming, at least where the forecast is headed here for, especially as we look into the weekend and to next week. But that said, it has been an unusual week, a very, very active weather pattern during the past week. We had cooler than normal temperatures, with the exception, of course, of most of the state. Yesterday, we hit 70 for the first time this growing season. And Kurt mentioned also some of our soil temperatures up near 50. That has also not happened until recently. And it's cooled down. We had a big cold front move through yesterday. But the big story, without question, well, there's two really that are related to one another, but lots of very, very turbulent, active weather pattern across the Midwest, with several major severe weather outbreaks. And I guess the positive news of that is that much of that really bad weather, really difficult weather, was in areas to our south and west. And Michigan was just on the northeastern fringe of that area. We did have some reports of hail, some high winds. There was even a report of a tornado spin up. But by and large, most of the really damaging conditions and storms were to our south. So that's good. The big news, though, without question, is the precipitation. And with that very, very active weather pattern that we've been stuck in, and it goes all the way back really to late February. I'll show you here in just a minute. But what a week in terms of precip. The precip, and this does not include the rain that fell yesterday. We had many areas had another inch of rainfall yesterday. But on the right-hand side here, you can see much of the state saw at least 2, some cases 3, even 4 inches of rain during the last week. And a little inset down to the very, very bottom here, these are departures from normal for the week, and most of the state is at least a solid inch above normal for the week, and in many cases, with the blue color there, it's more than 2 inches above normal for the last week. So wetter than normal doesn't really do it justice, and lots of standing water out there. What a change, though. We look back here not that long ago, just about a month and a half, and we were actually looking at unusually dry conditions in many parts of the state. That is no longer the case, as well, most of you can attest to. The last 30 days, actually looking from the beginning of January, I wanted to show this too. On the left-hand side here, this is a daily accumulated precipitation total running at Lansing. It's representative of much of certainly the central and southern part of the lower peninsula. The green line here is the actual observed accumulation beginning in the beginning of January, and then the brown line there you can see underneath, that's the climatological normal. That's what the climatology tells us we should be accumulating. And what you can clearly see here with time, especially in beginning really in the latter part of February and then during March and into the beginning of April, it's just that the observed line shoots way above the normal. So we've turned much wetter than normal, or we've been much wetter than normal for several weeks now. And at Lansing here, you can see this does not include the rain we had yesterday, but observed total just a little under 11 inches. The normal is only about 6.4, and so we've got a surplus here of about 5 inches. And again, most of that came during the last 4 to 6 weeks. On the right-hand side here, in terms of the space, this is a graphic that uses some of the radar estimates and fills in some holes, plus observations. But much of the state, you can see 4, 5, 6 inches of rain has fallen here just in the last 30 days. And again, doesn't include yesterday. So we looked at some statistics here, by the way, on the left-hand side. And for some sites in western and central lower Michigan, this is one of the wettest starts of January through early April on record. It's certainly in the top 5. At a couple locations, it's going to give it a run for the wettest. So if you're wondering how historically, how does that shake up? It's way up there. It's much wetter than normal is typically the case. Well, that said, we're going to talk about some changes of pattern. Oh, one more soil moisture here on the left-hand side. This is in the top 3 feet of the soil profile, the percent available water in that, and this time of the year, typically, again, very, very high values. Much of Michigan, you can see between 60 and 80% in that top 3 feet. And historically, at least on this particular product for the top 3 feet, this is a percentile ranking. Where does that shake out or stack up? Historically, you can see most of the state we're in the middle. But we are not surprisingly, we're trending towards the upper part. There are some areas now that are actually a little bit above normal or more than that. That's the blue color here, but that's when we're getting up towards the higher percentile. So this has changed markedly over just the last month, from again too dry, and now some areas becoming a little on the too wet side. So that's where we are relative to moisture. Things are at obviously capacity or even a little bit above that, but big changes are in store. So looking at the forecast here, I want to move through this. The weather map here this morning, big area of low pressure up over Hudson Bay, James Bay, probably more accurately geographically here. And you can see that big cold and occluded front. That's what went through last night. That's where the showers and thunderstorms formed ahead of. But sharply cooler today than yesterday. The exception would be upper Michigan, which never really got into the warm air that we did yesterday. Most of the state, even the northern lower, got into the warm air for a little bit, but that's all off to our east now, and it's being replaced by a Canadian air mass. I was looking at some temperatures. It's actually in the single digits air temperature now out of the northern Great Plains. Now, we're not going to get that cold, but today will be sharply colder, noticeably colder than it was yesterday. Highs only in the 30s north to probably the low 50s in the far southern part of the state. The other issue today, and maybe the big issue, very, very, very windy. Lots of difference in pressure from high pressure to our north, and then the frontal boundary off to our east. So expect winds 20, 30 mile per hour out of the west and northwest, especially this afternoon when we get more mixing. Actually could even see a little bit of trees down, that type of thing. It's possible we could see some gusts above 40 miles per hour. So a very, very windy day. The other, in terms of precipitation, northern parts of the state that are closer to that low pressure system and have a little bit of lake enhancement, we could see some snowfall, some snow showers up in upper Michigan. The lower peninsula, we're looking at a mostly sunny day, or at least decreasing clouds, becoming mostly sunny, and then cool and windy. The same is true basically for tomorrow, a little bit less in the way of wind. Here's our map for tonight. You can see the blue up there in the upper peninsula. Again, more snow showers, nothing significant, but just enough to remind us that it is that transition between late winter and early spring. And by tomorrow morning, Friday, you can see high pressure over the region. So that should get the winds settled down a little bit from what they are today. Next little weather system out here to our west, that frontal boundary, not a major system, but it looks like we could see some scattered light snow or mixed precipitation overnight Friday into early Saturday, but nothing, anything like what we've seen over the last week. It could be a trace, it could be a couple hundred. So, and best chances for that would probably be across the northern half of the state, unless as you go south. But that, again, we're talking most areas will remain dry and relatively cool tomorrow. Again, especially versus where we've been. On Saturday morning, you can see that front now is returning to the north as a warm front. And that's the big theme that we're looking at here for the weekend. And in the next week, there's a little bit of uplift ahead of that. So you can see some little bit of light snow there in the northern part of the state, but nothing significant enough just to see, or a couple hundredths of an inch probably at best. And so that's what we're looking at for the next couple days. After that warm front moves through, though, that's when we see the big changes starting this weekend, Saturday, Sunday. Our high temperatures will be noticeably warmer. We'll be into the 50s. Most of the state will see 50s to 60 for a high on Saturday. And then on Sunday, Easter Sunday, we'll see probably highs up into the 60s again. And low temperatures, just as importantly, from sub-freezing values here tonight back into the 30s and even the 40s by Easter Sunday. So noticeable warming trend. And also there's after Friday night, Saturday, no precipitation expected. There's a chance we could see a few isolated showers on Monday of next week, but otherwise we are looking at a very, very different type of forecast than we have for the last week. And I added one here. This is an outlook for early next week, because the next week is where big changes are in store, and especially given people are ready to go and get things done, at least to make this allow people to start to think about that. But next week we see upper air ridge build over the upper Midwest and the Great Lakes region. And on the right-hand side here, these are forecast temperatures here for Tuesday afternoon. And you'll see some 7s in there. So we are looking at the warming trend begins in the weekend, but by Tuesday, I think much of lower Michigan firmly into the 70s for highs. And as I look at it, I think we might toy with 80 by Wednesday or Thursday of next week for a high temperature. Low temperatures moving from the 30s and 40s into the 40s and 50s by next week. So much warmer and dry and sunny. Now, for those who have standing water, of course, and depending on the soil conditions, it's not going to change things overnight, but certainly going to help at least to get things drained. There's going to be a lot more evaporation taking place than has been the case here. So we should look for some big changes. And on some coarse textured soils next week, there might be some opportunities to start to get some work done, but big change. The next question is, well, how long does this last? And this particular pattern, and precipitation. I don't want to. This has been a big chart here over the last couple of weeks, but for much of the state, you can see below normal precipitation. Certainly for the upcoming week, there's no question about that. Most areas, some areas may remain completely dry here for the upcoming week. I would not be surprised at all. But if we do see precip, probably 1/10 of an inch or less. That's it. And so warmer and drier is definitely the direction we're going. And in our medium range forecast outlook here, this is looking at the 11th through the 15th, the 8 to 14 day, very similar to this. But one of the big messages is next week will be much above normal in terms of temperature and very high confidence. The models are all in agreement on this. So strong confidence in that. Precipitation is a little bit a tougher one, because Michigan still is on that area, sort of a dividing line or area between wetter than normal conditions to our west and drier than normal conditions to our east. We've seen that quite a bit during the last several weeks, and that's the case here for the medium range. But you can see here clearly that at least for southeastern portions of the state, with the brown, that below normal of precipitation is forecast, whereas when we go up to the northwest part of the state, they're in that wetter than normal area. So again, Michigan's sort of right in between, and this will probably continue this pattern into at least the 3rd week of April. So the warm and dry type of pattern, especially south, probably is here for at least a little while. And again, use those opportunities. We always do every spring when we get them, but this is the chance. This is at least what it's going to be our first major break, I think, in terms of that fieldwork opportunity. So summarizing here, big changes as we saw, cool, windy for the next couple of days, but then a long warming trend when dry conditions setting up. And so an extended period next week and possibly beyond that, where we're going to be warmer and drier than normal. So I'm going to wrap up my weather portion here and introduce next week's speaker for virtual breakfast is Dr. Kim Cassada, our forage expert here, and she's going to be talking about alfalfa planting recommendations next week. So don't miss that. And with that, I'll turn it back to Phil and/or Jenna. Thanks.